Hey, everybody. I'm Misty Buck, president of Miss Inc. Digital Marketing, and we are here for a Marketing Monday. It's kind of a chilly Marketing Monday, a little colder than we're used to. I have a friend in town from Colorado, and I told him this is his fault. Like he brought this weather. So anyhow, but we're here for Marketing Monday. We made it. It's actually our first one of the year. You guys, we've been out for a couple weeks with the holidays, and then I had some COVID stuff, but we're here. We're good to go. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's happy. And I have an awesome guest today. So my guest today is Kristoffer Doura. He is a financial representative at NPC Financial, does a lot of awesome work with nonprofits and businesses. Him and I have had several conversations about financial planning and all kinds of stuff. So we are going to talk about marketing and how he's building his business. But also he's going to talk to us a little bit about something called legacy planning.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Good morning.
Good
Misty.
morning.
Amazing opportunity to join you today. I feel like I'm, on a pedestal right here, being the first,
well, you're
person.
dressed like it. I'm totally like I just rolled out of bed and showed up. I was not ready.
Well, in my world, I want to first and foremost thank God. I got a second chance at life. And, transitioning after being a professional athlete, made me realize my true values was my family. I had a near-death experience, and as a football player, you just don't plan for those type of things.
Right.
Thankfully, I was educated. I had a master's in business, and I knew that it would actually, pave its way for me. Football didn't work out. Short sports career, but realizing that Trading Places was always kind of like my go-to movie as a child. I jumped into becoming a financial advisor. And,
he's the yin to my yang. I do not do numbers. He knows this.
Getting involved as a financial professional, I realized that there's a lot of needs, whether it's a nonprofit who focuses on their legacy. Really, how do you help an organization become sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
I realized in the pandemic that there was a need and a lack of funding from the government. I've specialized in helping organizations with their legacy planning, really helping organizations understand how to set the tone for the next 20 to 50 to 100 years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? I wrote a book about legacy planning.
Did you bring it?
I didn't bring it yet. It's actually still, we're still kind of putting everything together with our strategy.
Well, when you have it ready, you're going to come back on this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the 10 keys to a sustainable life, fulfilling nonprofit organizations. It's really just, sharing my near-death experience, but what I've learned in sports and how to integrate, those processes, application, and techniques around a team. And how do you use all those things and integrate that to a nonprofit?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited for you. So can we talk for a second about your story, actually? Because you've alluded to it a couple times. My mind was blown the first time I heard it. You're a local guy. You went to Southridge.
I went to Miami Southridge.
Went to South. My favorite part of this story, though, is that he wasn't like football wasn't like your track. You have talent, you have the size, you have all these things going for you. I love that you decided anyway, though, to get your degree and kind of do all these things. But what cracked me up the first time we were talking, and then I'll let you tell your story, is you were like, I decided I'm just going to give this pro football thing a shot. And next thing you know, you're playing in the NFL. Who does that? If you know the 1% of the 1%, I mean, hello. Anyways.
By the grace of God.
By the grace of God.
Oh, God Almighty. Miami Southridge was, the high school that I attended. I didn't play all my life. It wasn't like Optimist, Little League. I went to Richmond Heights Middle. So it's like I'm a local Miami guy. But when you think about, being 6'7" with an 85-inch wingspan, like I got the, real wide wingspan.
So you can't even fit the whole thing on camera.
It was an opportunity that, got me into college. But, as I pursued sport, I realized that I had to have a backup plan, and getting the education was very important for me. I walked on to the Dolphins in 2010, and great opportunity. The big tuna, Tony Sperano, was the head coach at the time. Amazing cast. When you think about it, my career was a little shot under 3 years, and I was with Pittsburgh when things changed for me. Dehydration was what made me collapse actually on the field. And, one thing led to another. all I could remember was being at the hospital, and they diagnosed me, with a blood clot. And believe it or not, at 22 years old, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what to do, and you're alone.
I'm 40 years old and I wouldn't know what to do in that situation.
It was.
So I don't blame you.
I feared for my life.
Yeah.
Blood, pressure was rising. Couldn't think straight, but I knew that the doctor said, "Chris, we got a decision to make in a small window. It's either we try to fix you because the blood clot is so bad, there's not enough circulation of flow. We're gonna have to cut your leg off and amputate it,
Right.
Or we can try to fix you in surgery." When you hear something like that at 22 years old, you have physicians all around you, you don't know really what to do. So
Yeah.
I gave everything to God and said, get me through it. Decided to go into surgery. And as they performed the fasciotomy, my heart failed. And I died on the operating table.
Really? Yes. Very, very powerful.
Dark time, but I got a second chance at life. And I'm so blessed to be here today, to be able to share my testimony. When I woke up, because they had to shock me with the 2 square pegs and revive my heart back. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I was in shape, being an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
I was able to absorb the electric shock. And when I woke up, then I realized that the only thing that really mattered to me at that moment was my family. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, they were on the next flight moving, and they were already in Pittsburgh when I opened my eyes that next morning. I hung up the cleats that very moment and said, I'm never going back to playing this game again. Mm-hmm. And realized that it was an amazing stepping stone for me, but it wasn't my end game.
Yeah. And I love this for so many reasons. Your testimony, the awakening spiritually, physically, emotionally, but I love that you had like a plan, because I think a lot of people out there also know, in addition to marketing, what I do is I work with athletes. Some are current, some are transitioning out of the sport, on sort of mindset and next steps and mental wellness, right? And working on all these things. And one of the things that they don't necessarily, or people don't necessarily have, is a plan, because they're so busy focusing on your sport. So when you say grace of God, you say there's no accidents. Thank God you had your degree and you had all these other things, these things going for you. And I think that you bring such like a beautiful energy to what you do. So as a financial person, right, I think your passion just comes through. And again, him and I have had several conversations, but I think like sort of that passion of just life in general, it just exudes from you.
Absolutely. Every morning I wake up and I'm thankful. Mm-hmm. I start with reading my Bible, reading a verse or two of scripture. And I realize that that's really what kind of drives me throughout my day. I always wanted to be a businessman in some capacity, because, understanding at a very early age, being an entrepreneur was really kind of, how you set your own destiny.
Right.
I was never a guy that was happy with just an agenda. It just wasn't my personality. As the reason why I decided to pursue pro sports, without having a full, swing background in it. But I took my chance and I took a risk. And that's the same approach that I did with the business world. Becoming a financial professional and really, understanding the need in Miami, South Florida, because we have so many entrepreneurs here, whether they're transitioned from the North, from the West Coast, or even out of the globe. So many people come here because our weather, our taxes are low. And then you have amazing people that you meet in all different melting pots.
Right.
So it just was important for me to become a business professional, kind of give back to my community, be a leader in the community, and really, share what I know. Because I can't keep it all up in my mind. I got to be able to kind of allude that to the community and help them in areas that they need help, whether it's nonprofits or business owners who are thinking of their exit strategy.
Right. And so I really love this. So we are going to talk about marketing, but a little bit ago, you alluded to this idea of legacy planning. So before we get into how you built your business after your accident and when you decided to get into this the financial planning, but let's talk for a second about what that means. What does legacy planning mean?
Yeah, your legacy, it really means, how are others going to remember the presence that you made, the impact that you made. When you think about legacy, legacy is you waking up every morning, writing your goals down, and being able to tackle those goals that you have and complete those goals, and make sure that, however you finish your day was way better than the day before. So when you think about that on a macro level, legacy for a business owner could be, well, I've helped many people with product or service. I'm at a stage now where I want to kind of realize, what's my end game? Am I going to be able to kind of leave this legacy to someone else to be able to kind of, inherit or take over? Or have I really put in enough time and resources to grow a business, and now you're ready to transition into retirement? So where I help business owners on the legacy for them specifically is making sure that we have a game plan. How do we understand what our business is worth, so we know the steps and the proper steps to take so we can transition, whether it's a sale or whether that's helping somebody inherit the business. You got to know your numbers, and I think that's really where I could bring a lot of value, is helping people identify their valuation of what their business is worth to prepare for a legacy.
Oh my God. And that stuff is super scary. I'm going to give you another little shout out real quickly, because you and I have started talking about some of these things, because I just been flying by the seat of my pants, and I would like a little bit, I'm not even going to lie.
Though you've been pretty successable, so
yeah,
you're doing some right.
Somehow, grace of God, we'll say that. I don't even know. So somehow we're here, but I get super nervous. And as you know, I sort of I'm like a deer in headlights, and every time we talk about numbers, you're so patient with me, and you explain things in a way that are so clear. So I just want to give you a little shout out for that. There, I appreciate that. He's probably like, "What is wrong with this woman?" It's just because freak out a little bit, because
it isn't necessarily it's the approach. Everybody is different. Everybody has a way that they are able to understand, comprehend, articulate. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about finance, about, business in general. So when I meet people, I'm a people person. I rather connect and build a relationship in the beginning and understand kind of, what are the goals? How do you understand the energy of somebody? And then that's how you're able to communicate with them, because you want to make sure it's not about being able to speak language or terms or things that don't make sense.
Right.
I can get them. That's great for me, but I want to make sure that it's at a very simple, relaxed way to be able to approach those numbers. Because I think that could be somebody's biggest fear, is not knowing how to approach your numbers. But it really is more of a mental thing. And as you coach people, it's a mental game of how do you approach that at ease.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way that I'm able to help people in my business.
Definitely have a strength in that. So let's talk about how you are building your business. So we heard your story. We heard you decided to get out of pro sports because of the things that happened with the accident and your second chance at life after such a terrible accident. And so I guess I wanted to know, what made you get into this particular area? And then how have you been able to start to grow your client base?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Believe it or not, I wanted to be a psychologist.
Really?
Yeah, in college. But I realized that clinicals, football practice, lifestyle, and then just being able to, kind of make it when you leave, your home state and go out of state, it's a lot of pressure. So I took a step back and said, you know what? Well, football paid my, way into college. So I need to be able to at least manage that in a fashion where I can, do football and at the same time study something that's going to be meaningful that I like.
I love it.
I decided to go towards business because, having entrepreneurs in my family, I knew if I did business, it would be beneficial in some capacity, even if I decided to use it while I was in pro sports or after. So, after my accident, I decided to kind of, pursue business. And I always knew numbers, the stock market, finance was something that I always was intrigued by.
Yeah.
Going back to my story with trading places.
Trading places, that's what I was just
Dan
thinking
Aykroyd,
about.
Eddie Murphy, pork bellies, futures, orange juice. You're like, well, what does all that mean? How do you make money out of those things? But then I realized that the capital markets business is kind of a business that attracted me. And then I decided to become a financial representative and, do financial planning for, people that I help. How I grow my business is organically. In the very beginning of my 7-year career, I used to cold call, believe it or not. I used to pick up,
Really?
all my, leads that I had, reach out to friends and family and just, let them know that I was in the business. Realized that was kind of a game that never ended. But believe it or not, I was really good at it. Never had fear to call anybody or to just introduce myself. That's what I was doing. As I got better into the business, networking was organic. But obviously, getting involved in, affinity groups, associations, really putting myself out there to be a leader and somebody who represents what I do in my field at the highest level of excellence. And that's really what kept me in the business, because there are years where there are ups and there are downs. It's just like any normal company that you build. And even as a financial professional who does services for people, you just gotta be able to really sustain the ups and downs and the meadows and the flows. But I love what I do, and I'm always out there, meeting new people, asking people for referrals, being able to really, share with them. If I do a good job for somebody, then maybe they may introduce me to somebody else. And I think that's the best way that, in my business, it works with organic networking.
Right. And I love that, because I think we talk a lot about different marketing tips and different approaches that professionals take and businesses take on this show. And one thing that we haven't talked about, at least recently, is that referral, right? So because a lot of people say their best source is current clients, right? That's where people get their testimonials, they get their referrals based, and that's really how they've grown their business. So how do you go about asking for those testimonials? Like, do you have any tips you can share about that?
Yeah, asking for a testimonial, you always want to get feedback. I think that's super important to mentally understand, how you treated the person in the very beginning of the process. What happened in between the actual process itself was, also very important, because that's what your, client remembers at the end of the day. Well, how was I treated? Do we, take our time? Did you explain the things that I understood on my level? And I think that's really what's important. When you do a good job for somebody, that's really what they remember. Not the very, very beginning of the conversation of whatever you needed, or, all the stuff until you close out business, but it's really the relationship of how you treated that person. So it's easier now to say, well, the things that we did together, what'd you think of that? And then you get some feedback. And then you ask, well, others that you feel would also benefit in mind.
That's a great question. I love that question. So can you repeat that question one more time? That's a really good one.
Right. Well, others that you feel would benefit by meeting a person like myself, who comes top of mind?
Such a good question. I hope you guys write this down. I'm going to do it when I rewatch this later. That's such a good question, because it's a nice way of saying, oh, hey, so do you have anybody else that I can do business with? Like, it's a nice way to finesse and just say, like, oh, okay, like, who comes top of mind when you think of, working together with somebody like me? And then I think that they're sort of a little more disarmed by that, probably. So do you get good feedback after asking that question?
I do get feedback. It's genuine. And I think also another tip or nitbit that can help somebody is, sometimes, helping, someone who is a nominator, you help yourself by helping them tee up that person that you want to get introduced to. Maybe crafting a text message, and putting it in a group text is easier, because a lot of times when people refer people, the person who's actually receiving that call on behalf of you in the introduction, they may never reply if the nominator is not a part of the actual conversation.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So when I get referrals, or introductions, sometimes we'll call them, right? It's sort of like the informal word of that. But I love that. I love when they send like a group text or a group email, because then it's like they're vouching for me, they're copying me on it. I have a chance to respond, and then they have a chance to just be like, oh, okay, great. Hope you guys connect. So-and-so is awesome, and blah, 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 blah.
It's accountability.
Right?
I think that's really important. And And that's really in anything you do. Like, it doesn't matter if you're, if you want to meet somebody for your business world, if you want, to meet somebody in your church home, if you want to just, go on a date with somebody, most of the time, organic, you find your significant other through your circle of friends. And I think
This
that's
is
the best
true.
way
My
to.
husband and I were friends before we started dating. I'm not even lying. We went to the same middle school, high school, same group. Didn't really know each other, but eventually that's how it came to be. So you're right. You're laughing too hard at that. It's true. It's true. Why? Because I'm too old to use dating apps. Sorry. We did it the old-fashioned way.
Old-fashioned is good. That still works, those methods.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for validating that. I'm old and not completely out of. Oh my God, we've gotten way off track. All right, so how else would you? So if somebody's new to business, they're trying to build it. What are some other tips that you would give them that have worked for you, or maybe that you've seen have worked for some of your clients?
Yeah. Well, don't be afraid to take risks. I think, and know actually through experience that failure is a part of growth. And when you think about, well, failure doesn't mean that you don't have another chance. It just means that, well, now you know how to approach it better. And that's through the experience that you're building through that process at that time. Because when you reflect back at your goals and you look back at, your production, you look back at, some of the notes you've written down, you can reflect back and say, well, you know what, if I would have, changed or adjusted, I may have gotten closer to the destination. And I believe that's such a big part of a mental preparation to be able to go back and understand, how do I get better?
So this is kind of like, I'm going to draw an assumption right now. I could be incorrect, but this is sort of like back in the day when you were playing football, that you guys would go and you would have a game plan, you'd watch the tape, and you would know how to adjust, right?
Correct.
So do you feel like you learned a lot of that strategizing that you're talking about, and that adaptability, importantly, from your experience, some of your experiences in sports or otherwise, but
the game of life, as I would say it. They taught us that football for us men who played it was going to be the game of life, to teach us everything that we were going to do in our future as men. And I wake up still with that, 4:30 a.m. mentality. I may not be in the weight room, but I'll be actually, reviewing some more finance. But it's the discipline. It's the strategy behind preparation that gets you to that Sunday game.
Right.
So essentially, when you think about it, everything in a sports context, whether you were a cheerleader, whether you were a golfer, a football player, or a chess, master, it's all about what you've applied in your preparation.
Yeah.
That's really what sets the tone to win the game.
Totally. I was a cheerleader. Can you tell? People learn that and they're like, oh, really? I'm shocked. Oh my God. But yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think learning the earlier that you can always learn this at any point in your life, but I think taking that, having a plan, being disciplined about that plan, but also being flexible. Right. Like, I think those are some really big keys to building your business.
No, absolutely. Flexible. You got to be able to adjust nowadays because everything's moving at light speed. People are TikToking, and I don't even understand TikTok, but it's so quick. But it's like, well, you have to capture that moment in time.
Yeah.
And I believe that's really the way that people are still growing or becoming more and more successful. They're adapting to the changes. And it's like, if we don't adapt, we die.
Yeah, I was actually just having this conversation this morning with my team because I started studying more in depth metaverse, NFTs, buying NFTs, getting my wallet set up and all this stuff right now. But it's because at first I was like, I don't want to own a digital shoe. Like, what am I going to do with that? I like to wear my kicks. Like, this is ridiculous. But as you learn about it, it's important, as you're saying, to learn, to adapt, to know maybe some things work for you and maybe they don't. But I think that that's a really, really good point of staying in a place of flow and learning how to adapt, but in a way that works for you. Right.
You want to know your game, because you'll never be able to play somebody else's game. But if you're able to look at your strengths and then your weaknesses, you do a SWOT analysis and you kind of figure out, well, what makes the perfect sense, where I could really, bring more value or strengthen an area that just needs a little bit more of an adjustment.
Right.
And
yeah, you're totally right. So real quick, break down SWOT for us.
Okay, your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities, as well as the
threats.
The threats.
It's Monday. We'll give you a pass.
Right.
But that's what a SWOT analysis is. So you do that for your, and I had never thought about this before as an individual too. And as a professional, we've done it all for businesses, but I love doing the SWOT analysis. So strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as yourself as a professional too.
Right.
I think that's super, super smart. That's a really good key point here.
Well, any nuggets of wisdom, write them down, record them, whatever way you can remember them, because sometimes you hear something and you remembered it at the second in time, but then you forget it at the end of the day, and then that could be what helps you maybe on a project or an opportunity that you're making a decision on. So be mindful as to where you're spending your time presently, and I think that could be the difference between somebody getting over that hump and winning and finishing that race versus somebody who just misses it by a hair.
So you're saying just be fully present and aware of what you're doing in that moment so that you can continue to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think distractions are a really big issue. Not just today. I think it's always been that way. But I think that is a really good tip. So we are talking about marketing and business building, but I think that's a super big key too, because I don't know about you, but people will say they'll come to me and they'll be sort of all over the place, in their thoughts or in their plan, thinking they have to be everywhere and do everything. And we're and I think you're really good at this, but let's break it down. Let's make it simple and have a place to start so that you can stay focused.
Right.
And you can make progress.
Well, you'll get a lot more done by just being more narrow, more linear to kind of what you're doing in the moment of time. You being more effective and efficient within a smaller window, as opposed to just being scatterbrained everywhere. You'll be working on something and you'll never end. And obviously when you're more focused on the task at hand, your results show differently.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with you on that. All right, so we just have a few minutes left. I can't believe it's almost been 30 minutes already. Can you believe it? It goes
I'm having such a great time, Misty.
Yeah. I know, we're just going to sit here and keep talking. Where can we get some coffee? I'm just kidding. All right, so what are some other, first of all, tell people how they can reach you.
Yeah, sure. Get a cup of coffee. I'm at the One Biscayne Tower, Suite 1740.
What is that? Somewhere back here.
But if you'd like to reach out to me, I'm on Facebook, Kristoffer Doura Finance. I'm also accessible on YouTube, Instagram, and also Twitter. But I think the best way is to call me 786-230-3843. It was going to be the best way to reach out to me. If it's a question, if you want to get a cup of coffee, talk a little bit about your business, I'm very open to being a resource, and I think that's really what's important. If it's not me, then maybe I know somebody in my network that can provide assistance, and I think that's really just putting it out there. Being open, friendly, and letting people know that I don't know everything. I'll be honest with you, but I know enough to be dangerous, and I think that's really what's important. Is if I don't have the resource that I can provide myself, I can connect you to who can. And I think that's what's powerful.
I love it. I'm going to start calling you Danger Mouse. I crack myself up. I'm glad you're laughing too. Okay. So, all right. Any final tips? Any final words?
Do everything, that's important to you with passion. Don't slow down in your goals. We don't get our days back, but I think we can control what's ahead, and by just staying focused. So words of encouragement is, for, our youth, let's find a mentor, find somebody that can hold you accountable. For our elders, stay involved with, your children's and the lives of people who help you, because I think that brings you energy. And then for people who are, transitioning into, building their wealth or transitioning into the next part of their lives, rely on your community. And I think that's really what's important. And by us sharing information now digitally, I think it's so more accessible. So there's no excuses, but if you, set your mind and focus, everything is possible, as they say.
That's a beautiful way to end it. I love wrapping it like that. collaboration, teamwork, get your mindset right,
Yeah.
and put your head down and work, right? And have faith in the rest.
That's right.
Have faith in the rest. There's only so much we can do. I already told you I'm here by accident. Anyways, just
by
kidding.
the grace of God.
By the grace of God and that only. All right, so we got to go ahead and wrap up today. I will see you guys in a couple weeks for the next Marketing Monday. We have some awesome guests coming up this year. I'm so excited to start another year with you all. I want to thank Chris. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I'll be honored if I get invited again.
You can come back, but I'm not wearing formal wear, so you're going to have to take it down a notch. Making me look bad on my own show. Just kidding. We love it. All right. Thank you again for being here. Really appreciate your time. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Enjoy this weather. I hope you took home some great tips today. I sure did. Appreciate you. And I appreciate all you. And we'll see you again soon. Make it a good one.